Hello and welcome back to Laurie's Something New with Something Old, where I showcase one of my favorite old products from Altenew. Here are the products we're going to use today. The Meadow Bush layering stencil set. We're not going to be using the die set for this project today. We'll be using embossing paste that will color with these re-inkers, and the colors that we're going to be using are Arctic Mountain, White Lake, Winter Lake, Polar Bear, and Icy Water. And that's just the re-inkers. For the ink blending on the stencil for the leaves, we're going to be using Evergreen. We'll need a palette knife to spread the embossing paste into the stencil. And then I used this die set to cut out the shadow and the word for happy birthday. So there is the shadow layer, and then the word is right there. And then I cut the shadow layer out of Vellum just to have it stand up above the pattern on the back. And then I cut happy birthday with some matching blue paper. Then I used embossing ink and embossing powder and embossed the happy birthday. I also used some glitter on the wet embossing paste, but it's not necessary. I just happen to have some glitter. So I'm using my stamp wheel to hold my stencil in place while I'm stenciling. And I'm going to start with Icy Water with the first layer of the stencil. And I'm using a blending brush to go in there with the lightest color of blue that I'm using. Once I'm satisfied with that layer, then I'm going to go ahead and put the next stencil in place. This is number 2. I'm going to take the embossing paste now, and I'm going to color it with Winter Lake. So I'm going to take some of that embossing paste and put it on my craft mat. Add some of the ink right to it and mix it up. And then I'm just spreading that embossing paste over the stencil, making sure that I fill all those little holes. Once I've put this layer down, I'm going to have to set this aside to dry before I do the next layer of stenciling. Once it's dry, I can then mix up the final color. So I'm going to be using the darker of the blue inks, adding it to the embossing paste I already had there, and putting this through stencil number 3. At this point, I thought it would be fun to add some glitter, so this is just some glitter that I had, and I'm sprinkling it over the wet embossing powder. So it's just that darkest layer of embossing powder. And then I'll very carefully pull that up and knock off anything that didn't stick and add more where I missed. And then I'll let that whole panel dry. Once that panel's dry, I'm taking now stencil number 4, which are the leaves, and I am going to line that up. And I've had to refer to the alignment guide, and you can sort of see it off on the left there, of how to put the stencil down. At this point, I'm using Forest Fern, and that's the darkest that I've decided to use for the leaves because the leaves are only one layer of stenciling. Using that blending brush again to make sure I get into all the little nooks and crannies of the leaves. Because the leaf layer also had some of the centers for the flowers, I needed to clean off the stencil before I did the next layer of just plain white embossing paste. Here I'm using just the plain embossing paste in white to go back and just add a little bit of the white in the center of those flowers. To finish off the card, I die cut Happy Birthday out of navy paper that matched the flowers, and the shadow for Happy Birthday out of vellum. I glued the word and the shadow together, then glued them on the front of my card and placed the whole card front on navy blue paper. One thing that I want to emphasize when using embossing paste with stencils, be sure that you wash the stencil off immediately before the paste has a chance to dry. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to get all that paste off the stencil. What I often do is have a pan of water nearby so that I can just put the stencil in the water. It keeps the paste wet and makes it easier to clean. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for next month where I'll show you one more card using Meadow Bush die and stencil set. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.